Vertigo Nation, welcome back to another episode of Vertigo, the podcast that will make your head spin. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new, go ahead, take this second and hit the subscribe button. I do release content regularly. It had started off weekly, and I haven't been so good at keeping up with the weekly drops. So first, to my regular listeners, I do apologize. And I am trying to hammer out a schedule that is really feasible, I think, for me. So Vertigo's episodes might become every other week, there definitely will be more than monthly, I can tell you that. But I'm trying to find a schedule because I appreciate the listeners that are coming back regularly. And I don't want to disappoint you when you come back and you see there's no new episode. But I also need to be realistic of my, life here and off the mic, and I'm just trying to find a schedule that works. And also, life gets busy, and I'm not always able to come up with a topic. So, there's that too. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping it interesting. So anyway, welcome back, Vertigo Nation. I got to tell you, I have been stuck on a Pearl Jam kick I feel like it's been since I went camping, at least, so that was the end of August, because thinking back on it, it was then, and I had talked about the song Wreckage, which I want to go into more detail. I'm actually going to go piece by piece of that song, because I keep listening to it, and it keeps just making me think more and more about the world as it is today. And so, I don't know, and I guess that's one of the things that brings me back to liking Pearl Jam, is because they are one of those bands that they don't necessarily tell you point blank what the lyrics are about, and they allow you to kind of interpret, for the most part. So I'm going to be talking about the song Wreckage, and kind of actually reading the lyrics. So I'm going to be doing that, but and taking it down piece by piece. But anyway, before I digress too much further, the mind of ADHD you are all listening to right now, that is what Vertigo is. Yes, it's how the mind spins. My sister and I actually, before I am going to take a quick left or right here. You choose which direction you want it to be. I'm going to say left. I'm going to take a quick left-hand hit. I'm going to take a quick left-hand turn here and say, my sister and I were actually talking. So as everybody maybe knows, if you listen to some of the prior episodes, I had talked about changing jobs. So my schedule is now 7 to 3:30, and I'm loving it. And I'm a machinist, and what I absolutely love is the opportunity to be able to have my headphones in, listening to music for a good part of the day at least. There is some machinery you can't operate and listen to music, but there's some that you can. And so with that being said, I went through one of these moods the other day. So my sister texted me, Kelly, who's been on the show, saying, have you ever had one of those days where it's like you just have no idea what you want to, listen to or watch? You start a show on the television, or you start a show on Netflix or whatever, then you stop it. No, I don't want to watch that. And you move on. Maybe this sounds better. And then you stop, and then you move on to the next one. Maybe this sounds better. And she was having that kind of day with music, which is ironic because Thursday at work, I was having that day. I started, listening to, I can't even remember what. It doesn't even matter. But I started listening to one. I thought I wanted to listen to punk, and then I was listening to punk, and I'm like, no, I don't really want to listen to punk. I want to listen to the, so I just was all over the place. And then I ended up just putting like my AirPods in my pocket. It was like, screw it, I'm not listening to anything, because now I'm just frustrated. And so her and I got talking back and forth, and she started talking. She was like, yeah, she goes, it's just the ADHD mind. She's like, crazy how that works, isn't it? Like, you just, you get in these modes where it's almost because you burn yourself out, which leads me to what I was going to talk about with like how Pearl Jam's been on my playlist now since August. And I've obviously gone down. I've been listening to all these live albums and so forth and so forth. And I feel like it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I know any day now I'm going to hit the wall and I'm going to come on Vertigo and say, so, I now I'm listening to Barry Manilow, And no, I don't think that'll ever happen. I don't think I'll ever be a true Barry Manilow fan. I mean, there's a couple of songs that I crack jokes about, and I can't even think about. Oh, Copacabana, I sing that to Gia, right? I think Barry Manilow is Copacabana. Somebody out there in the Vertigo Nation might want to fact check me on that and let me know. But was it? What did he sing the Copacabana? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. I think that's Barry Manilow though. So also my favorite time of year, trying to catch up on some. Now I just pointed out that I don't say this right. I say horror movies, and someone's like, no, try to say horror movies. Horror movies. Yeah. I mean, I don't say check the Earl. I do say oil, but I grew up with both my parents being from New York City, so downstate, and my dad from Brooklyn, mom from Queens, so, and then migrated to Long Island, at some point too. So you've got this mixture of like downstate that I've heard all of my life growing up, and so some of the words I saw, I've got the Central New York, accent or drawl, whatever that is, on top of a little mix of this downstate thing. So it's an identity crisis. It gets a little confusing sometimes, but anyway, loving the October, and the now like streaming. Hulu does the Huluween, and I just love all that stuff. So I love catching up on all those horror movies and such. Damn, I did it. But anyway, I love catching up on all that stuff, and new and old. I am huge into the old black and white Universal pictures, the old monster movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman. So I've been on a kick of watching, and I think I said this actually in a podcast, where a lot of times I'll just put those movies on, and sometimes I'll even just mute them because I just love the scenery, like that gothic, romantic time period of Hollywood in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I was watching The Creature, The Black Lagoon, actually the other night. So just loving that stuff. But then again, it can't be October and Halloween without watching some of those old classic slasher movies. And I think I'm actually going to watch the 2024 remake. I think it was a remake at least of I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's currently on Netflix. So I'm thinking of tuning into that. But just loving all things Halloween. And, can't believe that we're actually at the end of October. Time flies, man. I just can't believe how quickly time flies. I was just thinking, like, I'm going to be coming up on my 50th birthday here before too long, and I just can't help but think, like, how crazy, like, time has flown. It's just insane. I don't know what else to really say about it. So I want to break down these Pearl Jam lyrics a little bit. Because I just keep coming back to this song. And I did do a podcast about a specific line of the song where it says, I don't give a fuck who's wrong or who's right. I no longer give a fuck who's wrong or who's right. And then we'll come to that and kind of talk about that. And I did preference that in another podcast that I did. And there's an Easter egg if you want to go back and look for it. And that line in particular. But then I guess... And that was due to the current events. That was right around the Charlie Kirk assassination, and just everything that was going on, especially more in the news and media at that point in time. Because not just necessarily news, but media in general, between social media and print media and television, just all the craziness that was going on. But now that I've gone back and kind of listened to this song, I really just love how it kind of fits in. So I'm just going to kind of take some of... first of all, if you're any type of rock fan, any type of rock fan at all, from just, hard rock, like, if you're a classic rock, AC/DC, that, whatever. If you're a metal fan in the terms of like, Metallica, or maybe what would be even newer, I guess, I don't know, Five Finger Death Punch, whatever. If you like at least rock music, I would encourage you to check Wreckage out from the Dark Matters album by Pearl Jam. If you're not a rock fan, I'm not going to suggest that you suffer through something you don't like, but the lyrics are pretty incredible. So it opens right up. It says, visited by thought, another darkened day, how you're like the sun, hiding somewhere beyond the rain. I'm needing for the light, stormy is the gray, rivers overflowing, drowning all our yesterdays. Now, I know that there's so many ways that you can interpret, but for me, I just want to talk about how I've attached this to my kind of mental state at times, because I often feel visited by thought. I feel like that's a very common thing for me, that my mind is just always going, and not necessarily, I don't know how to even really describe it, but my mind is just always going. I'm always thinking about something. And oftentimes I'm really find myself like thinking about human behavior and why we behave. I really do think about that, honestly, a lot. And I think about even my own, more so even my own behavior. And why did I react a certain way, or what, why did I do that instead of this? Or I think a lot. So for me, it's like I'm visited by thought, another darkened day. And I like that too, because I feel very much like, I blame actually like church for this, but darkened day, like I feel like my thoughts at times are very heavy, not dark necessarily in a depressed state, but just very heavy in a sense. Again, going back to always talking about behavior and picking apart behavior and why do I react this way? Why didn't I react that way? Or, and even why did this person say that like this? And why, I just really like drive myself crazy sometimes. Like it's hard for me sometimes when I'm in those modes to really like shift gears and get out of that, And so that song is really what peaked, I guess would be the more appropriate English. We try to do proper English on Vertigo. Who's we? Because it's often just me and the other personalities that are somewhere inside. I don't know. So anyway, this thought, it can be very heavy. And so I often, find myself again thinking about that, which, kind of does put you in this, I don't know. I don't want to say dark in the way of, but you're kind of closed in by your own thought, I guess. And so that's why the lyric really struck me. And then it's like, so how do you get out of that, right? Like I'm needing for the light, I'm needing for that, because it's like I need to get myself out of this. Now, I also made a comment about like I blame church. So I want to talk about that too, because I grew up in the church, really ingrained in the church. I played in the worship band, I was really ingrained in there. One of the things, though, that I felt as I've gotten older, though, is for somebody who already has a lot of guilt and shame, I feel like the church just feeds that even more. Like, oh, you feel guilt and shame? Well, you should really feel shitty because, you are a sinful, bad person, And so that message on top of how you already feel for yourself just really puts you in this place of self-criticism, I think. And I've only begun finding the way out of that now in my life, honestly. And so, I'm not, now I want to be clear and say that is in no way, shape, or form a slam at Christianity as a spiritual, divine thing, okay? I feel church is very different. Church, in my opinion, is dark, twisted, just because human agenda then gets involved with divinity, and there's no room for that, really. And that's why I think spirituality is a very deep and personal thing. And so anyway, before I digress, I did tell you this is Vertigo, and I did tell you that this is going to make your head spin, because Vertigo just does that. We go all over the place here, man. Again, see? Me and whoever else. I guess Indy, but she's very quiet. She doesn't say much. She's lazy. She's my black lab, by the way, for anybody who hasn't picked that up in prior episodes. She always comes into the Vertigo studio, makes herself at home, lays down, and looks at me like, how long do I have to listen to you ramble? Because I listen to it every day. Like, she doesn't know I podcast it out loud to her every day, and she's just like, yep, okay. So I feel that, I guess, from what I'm saying is from the first lyric, the reason the opening lyric grabbed me so hard was I feel very much like I'm a person visited by thought. I feel like a lot of times my thoughts are dark, but I also feel like I've done a lot of work in the last year at least, and more, about really thinking about things that I've learned through therapy. And it's kind of funny how all of a sudden now things that like 10 years ago are like, oh, wait, that's what they were trying to tell me, or that's what makes sense now, or whatever. But again, as somebody who is also, brought up in the church, I do feel like the message at times in that, I don't know, it's just dark, right? It's just like bad, bad, bad. And so I'm needing for the light. Stormy as the gray rivers overflowing, drowning all of our yesterdays. So yeah, just all these thoughts are, to me, I paint this very picture of these thoughts are just coming in, one after the other, which is very true. And it's very overwhelming or overflowing, right? And it drowns out a lot of other things that I guess, we could be paying attention to, or maybe deserve our attention. I don't know, and so then the next verse, visited by thoughts on another darkened week, right? So how quickly, at least for me, I'm tying this back into me, how quickly days can turn into weeks, right? And how all of a sudden you can lose weeks. And my sister Kelly and I had talked about that very much with ADHD, how and other mental health stuff as well. So I'm not discounting any of that. So if you identify with that, but don't identify with the ADHD part, that's great, So, just how quickly we can get lost, though, and days turn to weeks before we know it. And I feel that a lot, or have, how even every winner hits a losing streak. The mistakes we all make and perfectly repeat. Yep. That's part of it too. Insanity. Chains are made by DNA refusing to release, right? Think about that. DNA is made up of, strains of proteins and such, right? And they don't break, right? So it's just incredible. I think the whole thing for me just really grabbed me and shook me on almost exactly, I guess they call it synchronicity. Things lining up and happening at the same time, vertigo becoming its thing, and me talking about, a lot of mental health stuff on the show. And then, kind of being deep in thought and on this path, and being on this path of self-discovery, but wanting to be healthier in body, mind, and spirit, and really trying to find my way in that. And then the song, comes and hits me out of nowhere. So synchronicity, but the song made me think a lot too about, I guess for me, breaking some of these habits. Like the sun is there, but you have to allow it to come in, kind of thing. There's work that you have to do, right? Combing through the wreckage, pouring through the sand, surrounded by the remnants, what we could and couldn't have, right? Raking through the ashes, falling through my hands, charcoal on the face of the burned up photographs. And I kind of think about this as, now obviously it could be literal that somebody's like combing through the wreckage, but I look at it in my life of like going back and like really stopping the cycle of insanity. Stop doing the things that I know, or at least I say I'm going to change. I'm not going to act like that anymore, right? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change these behaviors. My reactions to things are going to be different, right? And I'm talking about, again, on this, I guess it's kind of like a cognitive behavioral type thing. Like, I don't like what happens. Nope. The microphone picked that up. That is Indy. So, this behavior of, I don't like this action. I don't like when I react like this, right? Whether it be in a relationship, as a parent, as a friend, just whatever. I don't like how I react in this situation. And so what am I going to do to change that? And so that's where but I think it's so easy to get caught in this thing of like, well, yes, I need to work on that. Yes, I need to work on it. And then the next event happens and I react in the same way. So it's like really starting to, this song kind of sparked me to say, that's insanity, man. That's just, you're saying you're going to do it, but you don't ever do it. When do you actually do it? And so it's like, okay, now I really do it now, and doing the work now to recognize if I don't like this behavior, then I need to think about that behavior, where it comes from. Why is that a trigger for me? And then start making healthy decisions. So, yeah, I feel like this song just came along at a time. And this really, like I said, this has been a year long. it's kind of really what started the spark for Vertigo. To be honest with you, was all of this, you know. But this song, just like I said, came around at just such an interesting point in all of it because, and I think that's why I feel so compelled to share it, you know, because it really just moved me in this direction of like, wow, like I do allow my thoughts to really have more control over me than I would like. I want to control the thoughts, not the thoughts control me, kind of thing, you know. Let's see. The last lyric of the song, because then it really just you know, kind of repeats the chorus and whatnot, which is that whole combing through the wreckage. So then, visited by thought, and not just in the night, that I no longer give a fuck who is wrong and who is right. The game of winner takes all, and the means nothing left. Spoils go to the victor, and the other left for dead. You know, and now I had talked about that in regards to politics in the world, and me really just at this point saying, stop the insanity, stop the madness. Like, I don't care who's wrong or who's right. Like, let's really just look at this whole thing and think like about the situation, right? And so that particular lyric had really struck me. But now I'm even thinking about it a little bit further, you know, and thinking about, you know, how many times have I been in. I'll use my, you know, my relationship, my marriage as an example, right? How many times have you been in an argument with your spouse, and it's like you want to win, right? Or you want to you have the upper hand, I guess, or whatever your point. You know, you have to be right. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, if there's a winner, then there's a loser. And if going back to, if this is an argument with my spouse, do I want my spouse to then be a loser per se? And it's like, so how do you find the win-win, which is actually one of the 7 successful, what was that book? I can't remember about, you know, being successful. One of the 7 traits of highly successful people or something like that. But one of the things they say is you should always look for the win-win. And I started thinking about that. And it's like, when there's a win-win, then there's positivity, right? And I think I talked about this in a podcast before too, but I was also having this kind of thought that ties back in with that. And it is that, you know, in the win-win and the win-lose and whatever, you know, if you're in a dark space, right, like it can always get darker. And the darkness kind of just like swells and eats us alive kind of thing, right? But the light on the other hand is like there seems to be like never too much of that, right? Like you can't, you know, if you're in the light, man, I mean, that's just this beautiful place to be, you know, and who doesn't want to be in the warmth of the light, right? So I started just thinking about in terms of that, and just in where does my thoughts take me? Do they drag me into the darker spaces, or do they bring me into the lighter spaces, you know? And how do I deal with all that? But where was I going with that? So with the win-win and the lose-lose, how's that ties together, I guess, is just like, if we're looking for the win-win, then like there's positivity, and positivity is like good, you know? I mean, you can never have too much positivity, I guess, you know. When things are bad, they can always get worse, but when things are good, man, they feel good, you know. You feel like you're in this space of you can conquer the world, and I would rather be in that space more often than not. And at the same time, I'm a realist, and I understand that life has ebbs and flows, and there is a but, and that is, I feel like I have a little bit more control, though, of those ebbs and flows when I approach things with this win-win or this, like, I want to be positive about this scenario. So anyway, I hope all of this kind of makes sense to you, the listener. I think what I'm really trying to say and what I'm really trying to hit home is that, like, I am starting to understand how, you know, I used to think that being so philosophical and thinking all the time and whatnot, but you can really get lost in the sea of thought and then have no action is really what the summary is, you know. And I really want to be a person more of action, and I really want to make healthy changes and be better. So maybe the next 50 years, you know, I can have a little bit more joy and a little bit more of positivity in my life. And I think that's the goal, right? So, and I think that all of that was sparked by this Pearl Jam song for me, which, going back to my playlist, Pearl Jam has been heavily on my playlist, so of course there's a bias, but I also think that it's synchronicity and that those things come into play and come into line for reasons, and that's what that's all about. So boom, I tied that whole thing up. I don't know, that might be the first time ever in Vertigo history where I actually had a monologue where I tied all that shit together. Holy hell, thank you for joining me on the ride. Woo! We did it. Okay. We got the Ric Flair drip in there. All right. Vertigo Nation. So yeah, that's what's been on my playlist. That's what's been on my mind. These are things that I've been thinking heavily about and whatnot. So yeah. And I do have a feeling that because I've been listening to Pearl Jam now since, again, August, that the crash is coming. So I suspect any episode now you're going to say, so, I'm listening to, like I use the Barry Manilow. That'll probably never happen. And if that does, then I really need somebody to come to the studio and just check in on me, because that is so far out of my league that means that I probably will also be sucking my thumb and rocking if that happens. So anyway, I'm trying to think what else is really, there was some other stuff I wanted to talk about now. Peak season for leaf change has happened up in the Adirondacks. So if anybody got to take a ride and go see the leaves changing in the Adirondacks, man, what a great time of year to be in central New York. Apple season, love apple season, man. I just love apples in general. I will snack on apples. I don't know. They're my favorite fruit. And, so I love New York, central New York when it's apple season and you can go get fresh, picked apples right off the tree yourself. You know what I mean? The U-pick is so incredible. So I hope people are getting out there and enjoying that. We've had a really awesome October. Sunshine, man. I mean, it's just been incredible. Been rainy, I guess, for the last maybe week, but really we've had an incredible October. It was very warm the beginning of the month, so that's cool. Yeah, and just all the excitement, harvest time for crops and whatnot. Wink, wink. So yeah, just an incredible time of year. My favorite time of year for sure. So, Vertigo Nation, this is a short one, but I do appreciate everybody listening and hanging in. And as always, if you have comments and you want to leave them, I love it. You can also email me at vertigopod@gmail.com. You can hit me up in the comment section on Spotify and or Apple. And as always, I hope this episode made your head spin. Peace and love, Vertigo Nation.